Hi everyone, it's Michèle from Connections. Oh, my video is still playing. Good morning, everybody. My internet's a little bit glitchy, so I hope that everything goes okay. I am here this morning for a special caregiver chat. I'm going to welcome our guest, Lakshmi Sundaram. So today we're having a Caregiver Circle chat, essentially, where I'll be interviewing Lakshmi, who has done some workshops for our caregiver group. So we're really excited to welcome her. She's a bilingual counselor with a master's degree in counseling, psychotherapy, and spirituality from St. Paul University. She's also a registered psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario and a certified counselor with the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association. Welcome, Lakshmi.
Hey.
Thank you so much for coming. Maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to the field of therapy.
Well, in a large part, I think it was after I took care of my mother. I was primary caregiver for my mother who had Lewy body dementia. And during the time that she was diagnosed, it was also a really tumultuous time in my life because my marriage of 23 years fell apart. So there was a lot going on, and I was searching in a way for some more meaning and a direction for my life. And I ended up going to St. Paul University for a workshop with seniors in spirituality. And I saw this program and I applied and did what I needed to do to get in. And that's how I have the privilege of being with you here today. And it's really grounded in my mindfulness practice as a topic of what we're talking about today, in terms of I recognize that I was tired of being in a reactive mode, and always, especially with the challenges of caregiving, which was really, really very difficult. I had a tumultuous relationship with my mother. So during the time that she was struggling with dementia, we were also dealing with our own history, as mother and daughters often have. And I really found that the mindfulness practice gave me more choice in caring for my mother. And so, yes, I returned to school at 45 years old, and I did a master's in counseling and psychotherapy. And my academic research focused on mindfulness and caregiving, with several publications on existential elements of caregiving and how it can help us with growth if we can approach it in a way that we have more choice around it and not always being swept away or sometimes feeling like robots that we're just doing the duties.
Wow, that's really great. I'm learning some new things about you this morning. So, yeah, it sounds like being a caregiver really kind of impacted your life's course, I suppose, right? And as it does, for sure. So, and I really love how you integrate mindfulness into our caregiver workshops. So for those who don't know, we have Caregiver Circle, which is a support group where we also we really dig into strategies on how to cope with different challenges, and we love having Lakshmi come because she really focuses on the things that realistic things that we can do as caregivers. So I have a few questions for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Mostly because we're talking about self-care a lot these days. You hear about it a lot. It's kind of a buzz term. I have different feelings about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we have the tendency to think of self-care as like an indulgence, something that people with time for it can only do. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate on the idea of it, and what does self-care really mean, and why is it so important to caregivers?
Well, self-care, I think I love that you brought that up because it is thrown around with the self-care thing, and it kind of can become about me, myself, and and I need to do this self-care. And in a way it is, but at the same time, if I come back to my mom, and perhaps I'll be weaving that caregiver journey through this presentation, she definitely would have said it was an indulgence. You've got to push on through. She was a staunch, grew up in wartime England. You got to push on through and just put up with what what you have to do. And I grew up with, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, and children should be seen and not heard, and these kind of messages. So when it comes to self-care, the way I see it is that if I back up to my theoretical orientation as a therapist, I'm a somatic therapist, which means that I work with the body and the nervous system. And when we're in a caregiving situation, we are often very stressed, or we're in an upregulated part of our nervous system. And when we're in an upregulated part of our nervous system, even if I was going to start talking really fast right now and ask you all kinds of questions and maybe talk a bit louder and say all these things that happened to me, you might even notice right now that your heart is starting to beat faster and you just want to turn me off. This is what our body feels like sometimes when we're a caregiver. Like it's a never-ending place where demands seem to exceed all our resources, which is by very definition, the definition of stress, where demands exceed resources that we have. And so caregiving can put us in that stress situation. If I come back to the body, where we're in our sympathetic nervous system in a high charge of stress all the time. And we know from empirical research that this is really bad for us on a psychological level, on a physiological level, on a spiritual level. That adrenaline turns into cortisol, and it causes all kinds of things, like immune disorders, all kinds of things. So self-care is a place where we can engage that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation nervous system. And it can bring us down. So even now, as I purposefully talk a little bit slower, and maybe even invite all of us to just come into contact with our breath, we can notice that we can drop in a little bit. And here's the thing, we can't be stressed and relaxed at the same time. The other thing about the nervous system, which is fascinating, and I won't go on and on about it, I'm very passionate about it, is that when we're in that stressed system, our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our executive functioning where we make choices, where we engage socially, it goes offline. The term that people often use is we flip our lid. We flip the prefrontal cortex, and what we're left with is our amygdala, which is our survival system. And for caregivers, and I include myself during that time, I was often in my survival system.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at self-care as a place where we can reconnect and bring our prefrontal cortex back online, we see, and whatever that is for each of us, the self-care. For me, it might be a walk in nature. And really committing to that, not as even though it might feel like an indulgence. I need to be able to bring my prefrontal cortex back online regularly. Otherwise, my lid is flipped all the time and it's affecting me physiologically, and then we're no good for anyone. So it could be a bubble bath, if that's what we can do, where we can relax. It could be a walk. It could be a massage. It could be getting up 5 minutes earlier and having a cup of tea in peace. Even if you all think about right now that first, if you drink tea or coffee, think about how you'd have that first sip in the morning when it's really intentional and you're really looking forward to it. And so maybe extending that to 10 sips. That might be a place where you could start your day so that you're coming back into the regulation. You're coming back into relaxation. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I love the definition of just demands exceeding resources.
Yeah.
That just feels like I can feel that.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
where you just like, okay, I can't anymore. Because I just don't have anything more to give. And I think caregivers are often in that situation.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at it that way, self-care is absolutely not an indulgence, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
In order to care for the people around you.
Yeah.
There's just like, it comes back to that cheesy, analogy about the oxygen mask in the plane, right?
Yeah.
It comes back to that.
It does. And the demands don't have to be huge, because if we flipped our lid,
Mhm.
if we are already stressed, Well, just the fact, of course, now I have both dogs barking, try to manage the
It adds
situation.
ambiance. No
Yeah.
worries. It's life.
So
It's life.
right now I can feel my heart rate going up. I can feel that screaming
Yeah.
yell wanting to come out, but I'll bring it down. But if we can see that some days if we haven't slept well, and if I bring my mother back in, she didn't sleep well. She was having nightmares when I was taking care of her. So if I had had that kind of night with her and the next morning something happened, like she put a plastic container on the stove, that might have been enough to make me flip my lid and lose it. It doesn't have to be something huge. So the other part of self-care is that when we practice self-care, when we take that walk in the woods or that bubble bath, we can check in with ourselves. Because often when we're in a caregiver role, we have very little time to check in with ourselves. And that checking in with ourselves is that, how are you doing with ourselves?
Mhm.
Because often we're alone. How are you doing? What do you need? Where are you at? And the end. So it's recognizing our limits and responding to them with compassion rather
Yeah,
than like, you should be able
yes,
to
that
get
was
this. Yeah.
I know, like, in our workshop, one of the things that we talked about a lot that I really think is so useful and beneficial is to come back to self-compassion and to, like, you spoke of how important that is because it's so hard to turn off the guilt,
Yeah.
because we are conditioned many of us are conditioned to think that self-care is an indulgence, and if you're
Mhm.
not giving all of yourself all the time, then, you're being, quote, unquote, "selfish."
Mhm.
So, yeah, coming back to self-compassion, I think is really powerful, like, what would you tell a friend? What
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because, again, I can only really speak from my experience or what I hear from the clients that I have the privilege of accompanying is this internalized voice for me is that my mom's wartime British voice that you just push on through and you give until you have nothing to give and then you collapse
Yeah.
and then you better get up quickly
Yeah.
because and I myself burnt out after caregiving. So I clinically burnt out. I had adrenal failure. I have Graves' disease as a result of it. And so it's a thyroid issue. Um,
Mhm.
and and I wasn't even recognizing what I was going through at that time. I remember when I finally had some rest that my heart was beating at 110 when I was lying down. And I
Wow.
never really noticed that because I was just going, 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 right?
Yeah, and, like, you're bringing up this point too that it is very the mind-body connection, what
Mhm.
havoc stress can wreak on the body, right? And caregivers really do need to remember that there's an impact to all of the stress that they're feeling if they can't
Yeah.
find the time. But, okay, so this leads into my other question, really. When you can't find the time to take it to get rest. Like,
Mhm.
and it came up in our workshops as well, like, um, it's a huge challenge to ask for help. People know that they need help, or they get to the point where they finally realize, "Okay, I can't do this alone," but how do they ask for help? That, I think, is a huge challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's really hard to ask for help. And again, without always talking about my experience, my background is such that I was even raised with you don't ask for help. It encourages you don't ask for help. My mother would say you don't ask for help. So
Mm,
so it's asking for help in whatever little ways you can. And it might just be sometimes I had a good friend at that time that was always there for me and I could just call her and talk to her for 10 minutes. She didn't want to hear about everything. I didn't want to unload on her, but it felt that good that I could just connect with her and knew that she was there. Sometimes I would ask
mm,
somebody to bring in some food. And in my own context, I did have help because my sons were still at home. And I know that for some people, they don't have any help at all. But this part of self-care, sometimes the checking in, and
mhm.
here's the kind of vicious circle or virtuous circle about it is when we do slow down and maybe try and take that bath or try and have a cup of tea, then that inherent wisdom can go like, "Oof, I really do need help."
Mhm.
And if we look at as caregivers, we are helping somebody
Yeah.
that sometimes that's maybe not fun. And I want to say sometimes it was fun, but there's a meaning and a purpose behind that. We can maybe think that by asking for help, we're offering somebody else this opportunity to give.
Yes.
We're offering
Yes, and
somebody
I
else
mean,
to support us.
when people ask, "How can I help?" I think that it is a genuine question, and people
Yeah,
do wanna help.
yeah.
It's kind of having some answers ready, right?
It
It is
is.
to be like, "Hey, could you, make me some food maybe?"
Yeah, and you bring up such
You
an
know?
important point,
Yeah,
Michèle, because
yeah,
from my own experience, you're right. There are people asking if they can help. But
yeah.
sometimes people in their best of intentions want to help in the way that they think they should help. So in my case, sometimes people would say, "Come on, I'm going to come over and I'm going to sit with your mother and you're going to go out. You need to get out." But
Mhm.
for me at that time, I didn't need to get out. I was too stressed to leave my mother alone at certain times. What I needed was somebody to bring supper over and come and have supper with me and be in the chaos with me.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I needed. Everybody, it might be different. But so being specific when people ask for things to say, yeah, I really appreciate that. What I really do need is XYZ. And having the courage to say that out loud. And that's scary.
yeah, it does take courage. It
It does
does.
take courage.
Yeah, because we really do have that kind of reflex to be like, "Oh, no, no, no. I don't wanna burden anybody, or I don't wanna put anybody out," or, "Yeah, I can do it. I can do it all. I can do it." Like, and I think, uh, people who end up as caregivers have certain personality.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right. And if we don't ask for what we need, and again, if I come back to that, if we bring it all back to self-care or even a mindfulness practice, if we can have those few moments, even with our coffee, and intentionally ask ourselves, what do I really, really need today? Maybe
yeah.
even for the people listening right now, we can even drop in and just take a few deeper than normal breaths and feeling your feet on the floor and supported by the chair and ask yourself, what do I really need? How am I right now? Just taking a few deep breaths and asking yourself, how am I doing? What are the thoughts that are there right now? What are the feelings that are there right now? And what do I really, really need?
Mhm.
And whether we can have it or not is part of the question. But the other part, even if I say I really, really need a break, I'm going to lose my mind. And I remember being in that situation. I'm going to lose it. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to lose it.
Mhm.
Acknowledging that's and offering some compassion to that, like, I feel like I'm going to lose it. This is really hard for me.
Mhm.
Rather than, okay, just get it together. Stop having those thoughts. You need to get through this. You need to, and that might be the reality, but you can also approach yourself with some gentleness, like you would with a child or you would with a good friend. Like, come on over here, Michèle. I see that it's really hard for you there. I don't know what I can do to help you, but I'm going to just say, you're okay. This is hard, and acknowledge. So coming back to being a body-oriented therapist so that we can open to ourselves rather than constrict and close. Because when we constrict and close and create tension inside and we're holding our jaw and we're holding everything,
Yeah.
this is not good for us.
No,
Does
it
that
doesn't
make sense?
feel
Yeah.
good.
No,
And you
it
get
doesn't feel
you
good.
you get the body, like, the symptoms in your body too, right? Like,
Yeah,
the stress, it just it wants you to face it and acknowledge it, I think.
it
Um,
does.
and then so that brings me to my next question, and you talked about how you were diagnosed with burnout, after your caregiving journey.
Yeah.
Um So what does that, for anybody listening, what is caregiver, like, what is burnout from caregiving? What are some of the signs and symptoms? When do we know, okay, we need to find some rest or find a way to take a break?
Well, I think probably I'll answer the question, but if we again dropped in and asked ourselves, what are some symptoms when I'm completely overwhelmed? Everybody knows them.
Mhm.
We first of all will stop taking care of ourselves. Ironically, as human beings, when we
Mhm.
talk about self-care, when we know we need more care, we take worse care of ourselves. We drink more coffee and eat more chips and do
True.
things, that we know we shouldn't be doing that are necessarily good for us. We also tend to, when we are in that sympathetic nervous system, in that survival mechanism, our social engagement system goes offline. We often pull away from people, or we can't socialize anymore. We can't think clearly. So we
Mhm.
have kind of a declining psychological health. We might not be able to make decisions. I remember standing in the hallway and just kind of going like, I can't. Everything seemed huge.
Mhm.
Whether it was just like, I need, mom likes orange juice. It makes her happy. I need to get orange juice. How am I going to get orange juice? I can't go out with her today. I can't. And then wanting to break down and cry because of orange juice.
Right.
So when things are disproportionate, when our reactions, we're in a reactive state often, or we're easily moved to tears or anger, depending on the way we react to things.
Mhm.
So less patient, more emotional, not wanting to see anybody, just
Yeah.
feeling like we can't do it anymore, difficulty sleeping.
It's such a strange phenomenon. Like, we know what we need to well, generally, most people know what they need to feel good.
Yeah.
Like, if I take myself as an example, like, if things start to get really stressful, well, I'll stop doing things that I know will make
Yeah.
me less stressed, like going for a walk.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, those things that would make me more productive or, just overall healthier, allow me to do a better job, they drop away as you get more stressed, and it's a strange thing, right? Like, you wonder, "Why are we programmed this way?"
Yeah. It's true, and then, as a therapist, most people, when they're struggling, it's when their values and their actions aren't aligned.
Yes.
And so as a caregiver, I'm taking care of somebody. I love this person, whether it's my spouse or my parent or somebody else. And so I'm good at this. So those are my values. And then my actions start being like I'm snapping all the time at that person, or I'm going to bed saying, oh, I wish that whatever it is, we're having negative thoughts. And there's this tension there that, can cause us to literally be tensing our jaw all day, or not sleeping well, or we can't even set any boundaries. We're just doing, everything for everyone. Sometimes the more burnt out we get, the less able to say no we are. We can't sell. It's too hard to say no.
Yeah,
So
yeah, so
it
it's
just
kind of
perpetuates, right? And then we feel bad about ourselves because we snapped, or because we had hateful thoughts, or because whatever it is.
mhm. Yeah,
And
and that came up like, in our discussions as well, kinda like how people and comes back to the guilt as well, like, people lose their patience. We're all human.
Mhm.
We do, we snap, we get cranky, especially when we're under a lot of pressure, but then we add to that pressure by putting more pressure on ourselves
Yeah,
because, yeah, instead of taking a break, well, I know speaking from personal, instead of taking a break, sometimes I'll just be like, "Okay, I need to go harder." That's the
that's
solution.
right. And avoid, we do.
Yeah, yeah.
We have these coping mechanisms which essentially equate to fight, flight, and freeze.
Mhm.
And flight is, I'm just going to work harder. I'm just going to avoid it. Whereas, in a sense, if we can take care of ourselves, and I did have moments of this with my mom when I had support, and also when I was practicing my mindfulness. I come back to that because it's a practice, it's a mental training. It's like going to the gym and getting stronger to pick up that big rock. Well, the mindfulness helps us be more present, so
Mhm.
that when she would be, my mother had Lewy body dementia, and the hallucinations start very early on. And often they see little people. So she'd come screaming and say, there, Joanne's up on the shelf in the kitchen and I can't get her down. And so rather than say, Mom, that's ridiculous. There's nobody up in there, sit down, stop freaking out, which is partly what I was thinking. I
Yeah.
was able to kind of take a breath and go and have fun with it. Be like, okay, Mom, I'm gonna, Joanne, get down from there. And then kind of scream at Joanne and have fun with it. and bring my mother down.
Yeah.
Another time she said that she wasn't feeling well and she needed to go to the doctor, and it was nothing that she needed to do, but she wouldn't get off needing to go to the doctor and was obsessive about it and being aggressive. And so I just put on a white coat and some glasses and had her sit down in a room, in the waiting room, and pretended to be a doctor, and it worked that time. And so it allowed me to have more choice in that and have some moments of relaxation, which in a way can be seen as self-care as well. When we had these incredible moments of joy and laughter amidst the tragedy of the situation and the sadness. And we had also, and this is what a lot of people find difficult, and understandably, is allowed ourselves to sit and cry together as well.
Mm-hmm.
At how sad and hard this was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Allowing yourself to be
Yeah.
vulnerable. And I think that ties back into your question about asking for help. For a lot of us,
Mm-hmm.
asking for help is equated with just being vulnerable. And vulnerable is not a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing. I mean, it's scary,
But it's a
scary,
scary
very
thing for a
scary,
lot of
very
people. Yeah.
scary,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, I'm on that
You're on
for
that.
sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, so our next workshop with you is coming up
Yeah.
on the 31st of March. I'm going to put the link in the comments for people. So if you're liking our chat this morning and you're finding it useful, then you're going to want to sign up for this. So you can, it'll be in the chat. Anybody who's interested in coming, we're going to be talking about more of this stuff. Well, my next question is, so the title of our next Caregivers Circle with Lakshmi is Building Resilience Through Mindfulness. So I want to talk a little bit about resilience. What does that mean?
Well, I
What are we
think
talking about?
everybody has a different definition of resilience, or they could. And again, if I come back to my mom's, it would have been push on through, just get through it.
Yeah.
But really the working definition we want to work with is how can we get through it, but also grow a little bit through this situation. So the way I look at resiliency, the way I like to look at it is if we start our day with 100%, we don't start with 100%, but let's say we can gauge ourselves like a bank account. We have $100 in the bank account. We want to be able to bank resiliency. So when, even asking yourself right now, if your best self is 100, where are you at today? As caregivers, just noticing where you're at today. And even I'm not a caregiver today, but I feel like today I'm probably at about a 65. And so what that tells me and what I know about myself is if I go much lower, I can start heading in a direction that is not skillful for me. I can go into not skillful habits. So whether you're at 65 or 45 or 85 today, doesn't really matter. What's important is which direction you're facing in. If you're facing in the direction of that 100%, which you may never get to 100%. So coming back to that analogy, we want to figure out ways to top up our bank account during the day. So when something big happens, we're not going back down to almost zero or 10%. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Does it kind of make sense?
Absolutely.
So, and these small things can be noticing right now that I'm thirsty and thinking, if I'm honest with all of you, thinking, you can just push on through. It's probably another 20 minutes or so. You don't need to drink any water. You're thirsty, but it doesn't really matter. But I'm thirsty. So I'm going to take a drink of water. And when I take that drink of water, I'm just going to be appreciative that it quenches my thirst. And that might, instead of heading me in a direction of going back down to like 60, because now I'm going to be thirsty and I don't feel that great, which affects my ability to be present, I can top it up a bit. So this notion of resiliency is to adopt that I can not just get through this, but I can grow from this, that I can put some money in my bank account, some energy in my bank account so that when the next big things happen, I'm not completely depleted. And we can do that by small, regular habits that we do throughout the day. And you can think about it in terms of, You can't just brush your teeth before you go to the dentist once a year and expect to have good oral health. You've got to put in that whatever once or twice a day.
Yeah.
And so resiliency can be like that if you look at brushing your teeth. How do you stay, if we come to the nervous system again, come back to that relaxation response once in a while so that you're not always up there all the time on the edge and just about to burst or just about to collapse or just about to all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So that we can, before you get there, right? Before you get to the complete burnout or snapping or that just taking moments throughout the day. And I think that's like an especially um useful thing for people who really do are like, okay, well, I really don't have a moment to myself, because we've talked to people who, are taking care of spouses or parents with dementia who cannot leave them alone, who are
Yeah.
really in that place of like only maybe having a few minutes to themselves.
Only having. So buy a foot massager and stick your feet in it once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little things that are going to help us come back to doing something for ourselves.
With the intention of, I think I like that, just paying attention to what's around you. Like when you're drinking water, are you thinking about it or not? Like most of the time we're not really thinking,
We're
oh, I'm
not
so
thinking.
grateful for this water.
Yeah.
But
And what that's doing is bringing us back to the present, which if I come back to the body is in that moment that we can really slow down and drink that water or take that deep breath. We're engaging that parasympathetic nervous system a little bit and helping us. If we look at if we look at ourselves like we have this tolerance level, and if I didn't sleep well last night, maybe my tolerance level is this big. And in between this, I'm trying to go through a cycle, right? And then suddenly my person that I'm looking after has put a plastic container on the stove, or has my mom was extremely handy. So when she was wandering, we had locked the doors and then she disassembled all the locks in the house, so you wake up in the morning because she was trying to get out. So I'd wake up and my tolerance level was this big, if I sometimes would just walk around with my teacup and keep a focus of my warm hand on the cup, it would keep me present. Okay, what can we do about this? I've got to get rid of the screwdrivers. Let's unplug the stove.
yeah.
Instead of being running around freaking out about it. And in that moment, we're able to tackle what needs to be tackled with a little bit less stress.
It helps you it brings clarity as well, right? Like instead of looking at things from that state of panic, like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Just taking a breath and then coming up with a solution, like, hiding the screwdrivers.
Hiding the screwdrivers.
Looking at it as, okay, it's not the biggest disaster, but sometimes little things can feel like really big things.
They can feel like huge things. And if we can come back a little bit, we build that resilience, we can also tune into the person we're caring for. And another thing that I used to do with my mom, which is when I really needed a break, I knew that if I put on her British show tunes, that she would start singing and would be super happy, which would offer me a break. I didn't have to do anything when her show tunes were on. Or music.
Nice.
Music is huge and it's very powerful for people to and it can give us a break. So what other things that we can do for the person that we're caring for that can also give us a break? When my mom would love Tim Hortons ice caps. and she would just relish them and it would give me 5 minutes of peace.
Yeah.
So I would I'd get her in the car and go to Tim Hortons, go through the drive-through, sit in the car somewhere. And I would a lot of this, Michèle, is about bringing intention to what we're doing. So that while she's drinking the ice cap or while she's listening to the show tunes, how do I want to use this time? Maybe not cleaning the dishes or doing something. Let me sit down and resolve. So bringing more intention to about where we can have those few minutes here and there.
Yes, I really love that. We have one of our viewers, Paul, saying beautiful message all around, especially like your point that reaching out allows others the opportunity to help. It's a gift to them in a sense. And he said, brilliant to address like a doctor to help your mom, by the way. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, and thanks to Michèle for arranging this chat. So
Mm.
you're welcome, Paul.
Mm. Yeah. We can. There's moments, sometimes I often think that when I have the time one day, I'd like to write a humor book about the journey with my mom and dementia, because there were so many fun things that we sometimes forget.
Humor is an important part of it.
Really
Like,
important.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
She used to get dressed and put both legs in one pant leg and then hop around, and we'd laugh and laugh and laugh about it. Laugh about it, right? So there can be humor moments, and really taking care of ourselves in the moments when they are quiet. Often we tend to rush around and do
Mhm.
something, but
Yeah,
at
take a
least,
moment to
yeah,
do all the other things
to
that
do all the other things. But
yeah.
maybe we can say, okay, I will do all the other things, but first of all, I'm going to make that maybe a decaf coffee for the second or third one. So, and I say that jokingly, but not paying
Yeah.
attention to what we're consuming, because if we're drinking 5 coffees a day to kind of stay with it, it's also going to make us jittery and irritable as well. So
Mhm.
really taking care of ourselves in that.
This has been so great, Lashmi. I really hope that some of our listeners and viewers today really take the opportunity to make it to our webinar. It is a webinar, so accessible for people from all around the Outaouais. It's free if you're a caregiver and you want to tap into some more of that mindfulness to build resilience, the resilience that we've been talking about. Then I invite you to sign up for that and any other caregiver events that we have coming up on the horizon. We also have a newsletter, especially for caregivers. So we send that out once a month, and you can sign up for that as well by becoming a Connections member. And I will leave that in the chat as well. Oh, Paul says, please write that book.
Oh, okay. That's wonderful. I have to take
So,
better care of myself and give myself more time to write that book. But I do want to, yeah. Because there can be so
yeah.
much beautiful, sometimes when my mom was diagnosed, our family was going through a lot of difficult things. And in a way, her dementia brought us back together. It was quite a beautiful thing in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah, and it changes the relationship.
it changes the
Like,
relationship.
you
And there
know,
was a lot of healing. I mentioned a little bit about our mother-daughter relationship, and there was a lot of healing for us. I think that during that process, as much as it's horrible, it was a gift. I even
well,
published an article on Sylvia's gift, the gift that she gave us all. It was a beautiful gift, and I could send it to you. It's a little bit of a academic article, but I could send it to you, and you could post it somewhere if people are interested in that. But
absolutely. If we
yeah,
can include it in our next newsletter, even if you're,
it's quite long and academic, so I don't know if
it
you
could be
want
a
it in your newsletter. It could be
it could be a
I'll just
link
have to check
tree.
in with the publisher to see if I can do that. But
Oh,
but
okay.
really,
Yeah,
but really, it does
sure.
come down to this notion, and as a caregiver, of mustering the courage to drop our guard and to be vulnerable together. And sometimes for the person we're caring for, they're being very vulnerable, and that's part of their struggle sometimes. I know for my mother, as a very strong person, it's very hard for her to have somebody take care of her. She was the
Yes,
ultimate not have anybody, not ask for anything, take care of her. So
that's
sometimes showing my vulnerability also allowed us to connect,
mm,
whether she knew it or not. It softened my heart towards what was going on.
it's a
And
beautiful story.
yeah,
And thank you for sharing it with us.
yeah.
Really appreciate that. And I think you really bring a lot to our caregiver groups because you've had that experience and you can really relate on that on your with your lived experience
Mhm.
on the same kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause a lot of it does come down to, and again, maybe as a somatic therapist, for those of you that have animals or children, we know that when we're tense, our animals or children pick up on it. Our nervous systems communicate, whether we are aware of it or not. And when we can soften and open, it often helps the person that we're accompanying. And especially when it comes to dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, where all the cognitive faculties aren't necessarily there, but the person still has a nervous system that picks up on cues.
Yes.
And
That's
so
a really
really,
good point.
yeah,
Yeah. I love that.
yeah,
Yeah, another way that helping yourself helps others.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is incredible chat. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. Really enjoyed it, and I think our listeners and viewers will get a lot out of it as well. Thank you again.
Thank you, Michèle.
I look forward to seeing you again on the 31st for our workshop.
Yeah, I look forward to it too. Thanks a lot, Michèle.
Thanks.
Oh,
Thanks, everybody.